a lot of people have asked us what our parenting style is. I was working full-time as a lawyer when my kids were toddlers. So that's when children have time for you. You always have time for children as a parent, but children have time for you only when they're really toddlers or kids. So in the evenings, they would all sleep on 3 mattresses on the floor, and so I would fall in with them. My husband and I would read books to them. But because they're different ages, you find that no correspondence between questions or interests or the level of sophistication, and you also want to include them and you want to include lessons that learn. So I did away with books, turned off the lights, all of us on the floor, and then I would start. And it was so much better, and I really advise to all parents to do that. Just make up your stories, and you can't imagine how effective a form of parenting that is. Because lessons you learn today, who misbehaved or who said something wrong, lessons that happened yesterday, who was rude to the helper or who did not clear their table, you can build them into your stories. And you can't imagine how interested they are because there is a chance that you might include them in their story. I thought I want to talk a little bit about my childhood and life in Singapore because people didn't know if I grew up in Singapore. The National Library was a monument of great personal importance to me. When we were growing up in Singapore, there were really no libraries. Now we have libraries galore everywhere. At the time when I was growing up, there was one National Library. I don't know how I was so lucky to find it. I was living in Upper Thomson at that time, and I used to walk by myself every weekend to the National Library. I don't know, maybe it took me 2 hours, and then I went to the library and just saw the splendors of not just books, but all kinds of beautiful things of design. And a place like this, everything had beauty and everything had thought in it. And you know, in those days, you never saw such things. There were no museums yet. And at the National Library at that time, there was a small little hawker center at the foot of it. So it's the first time I've ever had hawker center food on my own, which was, I thought it would have been quite recent, maybe like 1965, around then, a plate of char siu fan for 50 cents. You know, so these moments in childhood and the libraries that we now have, we only had one. Maybe I want to talk about something related also to the National Library because I used to walk everywhere and I discovered Arab Street. If you love design, then all the textiles there come from everywhere in the world. And many of the merchants there really know their textiles. So if you go and you touch something, you say, okay, this one is from some place in Korea or some place in Thailand or some place in Indonesia. And as a child, when I went, school uniform or whatever, nobody cared about you. You could touch all these materials. There was no distance between the window shopper and the product because you love something that was being sold, and that kind of shopkeeper relationship can be so interesting if you're interested in the product and something a little bit more. I think a little bit about my husband. Every single year, he will be breathing down my neck and he'll saying, have you got the list? I started working with prisons 2006. And we got to see how talented they were. So that's our life in art in prisons. But with my husband, every year he would want me to pick with him good cards for Chinese New Year or for Christmas, work of artists in prison. And then, so he would need a lot of time because unlike me, I would visit the prisons in the first place and I would talk to each individual artist. And some of them I know, sadly, for quite many years. And they would talk about their art. My husband would want to read every little snippet of writing that goes with the painting. So the work that we put in is just unbelievable. So I would now like to introduce my husband, who's going to talk about the cards.
Singapore is also about our human relationships and our ren ching wei. And I use prison art to express it because they express it better than I can. So, for instance, for many years, I had behind me, behind the two main VIP chairs, for many years, I had this painting, which I specially selected. It's a set of flasks with flowers growing in them. And I usually work with prisons with the permission of the artist to summarize it in just one phrase. So it's easy for everyone around the world to understand. And this summary just said, the flasks represent the gathering of family members. Very simple. So that people then think for themselves what it means. And I had this painting behind me for a long time. Another painting I had behind me for a very long time, which is this one. Very similar meaning. And it just makes people think. So through these simple expressions, it's all part of the culture of respect we're trying to develop. It's a very important part of what we have to develop in Singapore.
花无上山，地袂肥，人无作恶，无人为。